this is Quick Skills, and today I'm answering a question from one of my viewers. Steven writes, connecting a controller, if I bought a joystick like a double joystick controller to play doubles for like Street Fighter, would I be able to map it the same way? I have a Super Console to Kinhank. And to answer your question, Steven, yes, if you own a Super Console X2 Pro or any other Emuelec device, any other retro console you can find online that uses Emuelec, you will be able to use a fight stick and program it for all the different fighting games you can see on the device. I will be doing a step-by-step tutorial showing you how to program your fighting stick at home. However, if you haven't purchased a fighting stick yet, go to the description of this video. I'm going to put a link to Aliexpress. It's going to show you where you can buy a fighting stick. This is one of the cheaper ones I found, and I do like it because it has the Bluetooth adapter that's going to allow you to be wireless when playing your fighting games at home. The other thing is I'm going to link a Super Console X2 Pro for you as well. If you haven't already purchased a retro console, you will be able to find it in the description of this video as well. So let's get started with the tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how you can reconfigure your fighting stick at home for the various different fighting games found on your Emuelec powered retro consoles. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention that this is a very tedious process and you will have to do it for every different fighting game that you play. But once it's done one time for that game, it will be done forever and you won't have to do it again. Also, if you look at the arcade cabinet on the screen, there is a red and a blue side. And on that screen, you can see there's 6 buttons on each side. Your fighting stick might have 6 buttons or it might have 8 buttons. I'm going to be using an 8-button configuration for this tutorial. And if you only have 6 buttons, you're just going to ignore 2 of the buttons. So we'll cover that in just a second. Step number 1 is going to be plugging in your fighting sticks to your retro console. And if the menu doesn't pop up automatically, push start on your controller so that you can pull up this menu. This menu here should be automatically pulling up if you have never mapped your controller before. But if you have mapped your controller, then you will have to go through the menu by pushing start to find this controller mapping selection. Once you've done that, you're going to pick the controller you want to be player number 1, which is on the left side, and we're going to push A on that controller. Once that menu pops up, this is going to be configuring your gamepad for the left one. And from there, we're going to push up on our joystick, down on our joystick, left on our joystick, and right on our joystick. That's the easiest ones to do. Then your fighting stick should have a dedicated start button and a dedicated select button. If they're not labeled, you get to choose which one is your start and which one is your select, but just make note which one you selected. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky visually, but in your mind, you need to label all 8 of those keys. And for this video, I'm going to be starting on the lower left button of my fighting stick, and that one is going to be number 1. The lower left and then 1 to the right is going to be number 2. We're going to keep going right. That's going to be 3. We're going to go right one more time. That's number 4. So the bottom row should be labeled from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the top row is going to be labeled from left to right, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it should be 2 rows of numbers from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4 is the bottom row. 5, 6, 7, 8 is the top row. And so if we look at button A on our controller, we are going to select button 2. Remember, that's the lower row from left to right, button 2. So we're going to push that button. And now we're going to push button 1. And now we're going to push button 6. That's the top row from 5 to 8. The second one is number 6. And then on the button Y, that's going to be button number 5. Now on the left shoulder, you're going to pick button number 7. So that should be the third one on the top row from left to right. And then on the right shoulder, we are going to pick button number 3. And then on the left trigger, we're going to do button number 8. And on the right trigger, we're going to do button number 4. So that configuration should match a standard controller. And if you don't have left trigger or right trigger, you're going to follow the steps for the left thumb, right thumb, and all these other buttons. All we're going to do is hold any button down to skip. So if you don't have 8 buttons and you have a 6-button fighting stick, all you're going to do is hold buttons on button 7 and button 8, the last two that we did. You're just going to hold any button down. And then once we get down to hotkey enable, we want to hit select. Whatever button you picked for select, you're going to push that button again. And that's going to be important because we're going to use that to get into another menu. So now that you've done that, you're going to do that on fighting stick number 2. So now I have my right fighting stick. We're going to follow the same steps. Start and select, and then again, this is button number 2, this is button number 1, this is button number 6, 5, and then we're going to do 7, and 3, 8, and 4, and then we're going to hold any button down, so skip these here. We're going to continue on, and now on hotkey enable, we're going to push select. And now we have both controllers configured. Now the next thing I want you to do is look when you push any button on your controller. So I'm pushing buttons on my controller. On the bottom left-hand side of my screen, I have a red blinking light, and there's 2 blinking lights. So the one on the left simply means player 1. So where it says PS player 1's controller, we're going to switch that, and we're going to do 0 USB gamepad. And you see here, we're still player number 1. Over here, we're going to go to player number 2. We're going to pick number 1, and we're still player 2. If you don't have that little box on the bottom, you can go here where it says Show Controller Activity. That's going to show you which controller is configured where. So on my right, on the screen, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, we have player 2 on the right side, we have player 1 on the left side, and now we're ready to configure some fighting games. So let's get started by rekeying some fighting games. I have Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. This is the arcade port. Once your game is loaded up, we're going to pick player 1 and player number 2. We want to make sure both are playing so that way we don't have to worry about an NPC. The next thing you want to do is test all the buttons. So on Ryu, we're going to do 1, 2, and 3. And 1, 2, and 3 was weak, medium, strong. And 5, 6, and 7 is weak, medium, strong for punches. So we have kicks and punches. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same order, 1, 2, and 3, but I want to make it so it's strong when I kick and not weak, and we want to make it weak when it's number 3 and not strong. I don't know why you would want to do that, but let's just say that is how you learned how to play. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold select on your fighting stick, which should be your hotkey. You're going to hold that down and press X on your fighting stick, which should be number 6 if you followed my tutorial. Now we're going to go down to where it says controls, and I want to make you aware that this will work from player number 1, and player number 1 is going to be able to change port 1 controls and port 2 controls. So you do not need to do this on player 2 to remap player number 2. And so we're going to go into port 1 controls. And now for this particular game, it actually labels each of the buttons. So that's very convenient because most games don't label it. So there's a good first tutorial on how to do it. So we want to keep medium kick exactly where it is, but we want to change the weak kick, which is button number 1. If you see a picture on the left-hand side, see how it's the lower left button on your fighting stick? So that one we're going to change to strong kick. And then we're going to go to where button number 3 is. It's shown here on the left as like the lower right hand trigger, but that's button number 3 on our control that we mapped. And we're gonna, not button number 3, that one is button number 3. That's actually button number 7. So this is button number 3. That picture represents button number 3, even though it's confusing. We're gonna change that to weak kick. So now that we've done that, we're gonna return back to our game. And now let's do 1, 2, and 3. So you see now 1 is strong, 2 is medium, and 3 is weak, which is reverse from where we did it. And now we can go back in. Oh, let's test out Ryu real quick, or Ken. So we're going to do 1, 2, and 3. So his medium is kind of like an upper kick, but let's do punches for Ken because his are a little bit more visually the same. So now we're going to go back into our player number 1. We're going to hold select and X, which is button number 6. We're going to go to controls, but this time we're going to go to port 2, and we're going to map the punches differently. So button number 5, which is weak punch, we want to make that strong punch. And then button number 7, which currently says strong punch, we want to make that weak punch. So now that's not going to affect Ryu, but it will affect Ken. We're going to resume the game. So now 1, 2, and 3 have been changed. So now we're running out of time here, but that's okay. Let's say we want to keep that setting so every time we jump into Street Fighter, we don't have to remap it again. So now we're going to hold select and 6 again, which is button number X. You're going to go back to your mapping, or I'm sorry, your controls. And now where it says manage remap files, we want to save game remap file. So we hit that button. You're going to see now active remap file has been updated. And if you screw it up and you can't get it back to work, you can just push this reset input mapping and it'll go back to whatever default. So don't worry, if you mess it up, just go right here to reset input mapping and it'll give you a fresh start at it. But if you do map it, now when we go to our game and we exit out of it, let's just say we wanted to play something else and now a couple of days later we want to go back to Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. We're going to load it back up and it's going to have the same buttons map. So we're going to do both players, so test them out. So under Ken, 1, 2, and 3, for Ryu, 1, 2, and 3 have been switched. So button number 1 should be strong kick, button number 2 should be medium, and button number 3 should be weak kick. And now Ken, button number 1 should be strong punch, button number 2 should be medium punch, and that's 5, 6, and then 7 should be weak punch. So I know visually that's kind of hard to imagine, but I trust me, if you follow this step-by-step instructions, you will be able to follow along with that numbering system that I created. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our controls, and because I do not want that fighting style, I'm going to go to reset input mapping, and then I'm going to delete that map. So now I don't need to worry about it. It's completely gone. And now, when I push 1, it's now weak kick. 2, it's now medium kick. And 3, it is now strong kick. When we go to Ken, 5 is weak, 6 is medium, and 7 is strong. So that is how you map it on an arcade-style game. Now we're going to go to a console. Let's go to Dreamcast. So on Dreamcast, we have Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and we're just going to see how different it looks with the console. So this is one of my favorite fighting games of all time. Now we're going to use the same steps that we used to map our controls. We're going to map it for this one. So again, button number 1, button number 2. Button number 2 doesn't do anything. Button number 3 does that. Button number 1, 2, 3. So the mapping is all jumbled up here. So this is a great example. So now we're going to hold select and X, which is still button number 6. We're going to go to controls, and we're going to go to port 1 controls. Now it gets a little bit confusing here because they're not going to be labeled hard kick or right kick. And so what you have to do is figure out what Y does on your controller. So when you see that it is button number 1, which is the lower left button, it is Y. So whatever Y does, and this is going to take a little bit of a trial and error when it's not labeled. So anytime I push the left number 1 button, it's pushing Y on a Dreamcast controller. So it helps if you have it mapped out. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to pull up a Dreamcast mapping that'll help me rekey this fighting game. Okay, so I do have a Dreamcast picture up on my screen now, so I can go through and remap the buttons. So button number 2, we want to be button B. So we're going to select B from the list here. Button number 1, we want to be A. Button number 6, we want to be Y. Button number 5, we want to be X. And then we're not going to mess anything up here. That's fine. And then this is button number 7. So we want that to be left trigger. And then we want button number 8 to be right trigger. And then these here are not going to do anything. So we're going to move it down. The Dreamcast did not have those extra buttons. And so we are all set now. So player 1 has been configured. We're now going to go to player number 2. And I'm hoping we're correct because I'm doing this in one take. And so button number 2 we want to be B. I'm just matching the controller on the Dreamcast. Button number 1 we want to be A. Button number 6 we want to be Y. And button number 5 we want to be X. And I hope I didn't get the X's and Y's mixed up on my previous take. And so button number 7 we want to be left trigger. And button number 8 we want, or sorry, button number 4 we want to be right trigger. So I might have numbered it wrong. We're going to make that nothing. We're going to make that nothing. And so now it's going to take a little bit of trial and error. We're going to go through. So we have our low, medium, and so there's just low and weak and strong, weak and strong. So that's exactly the way I want it. And then our assist are left assist and right assist. And it looks like I got my triggers kind of mixed up here. So we're going to fix Ruby Heart. We're going to go back to control, see what we're doing wrong here. And so we have B, A, Y, and X, just the way we want it. And then we have left trigger, right trigger. But it's messing it up. When I do left trigger, it's like the actual trigger on my controller, or on it's the wrong button. So let's see, is there any other button we need to do? Let's try this. Left trigger, right trigger. We're going to turn these off. Okay, so we still have kicks on the bottom, punches on the top, and then we have assist left. And where's my, assist right. We have everything configured the way we want it. Now let's check cable. So cable is exactly the way we want it as well. We have both of our assists working the way we want it. So I know it's a little hard to describe. Hopefully you're able to get the idea. But we have rekeyed a console game. We have rekeyed a arcade cabinet game. Let's do one more for good measure. I'm not going to save this configuration. I'm just going to exit out. But now you know how. So let's go back into arcade because I think arcade is going to be the one that's going to give you the most trouble. Let's go into favorites here. Or I was going to do this one, Marvel Superheroes. This is another arcade cabinet game. So one thing you're going to want to do to help is you're going to want to have Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, and you're going to want to see what that key configuration is going to look like. And so I do have credits in there for player 1 and player 2. So we're going to hold select, which is hotkey, and number 6, which is X. We're going to go to controls. We're going to go to port 1 controls. Now let's see what we're working with. So they don't have any numbers on here. So it just says button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. So what you have to do for that is, if you look, button number 2 is button number 1 on our game. Button number 1 is button number 2 in our game. Button number 6 is button number 3. And button number 5 is button number 4. And I know that's very confusing, but let's just see what those buttons do. So we're going to go 1, 2, 5, and 6. So button 1, button 2, button 5, button 6. So that looks pretty good. But if we want to switch them, all we have to do is go back into our menu. And let's say we wanted our kicks on the top row and our punches on the bottom row for whatever reason. So in this scenario here, the top buttons that are shown here are currently kick. So we want 3 to be where 1 is. We want 4 to be where 2 is. So we're going to do 4. We're going to change that to 2. We're going to change 3 to 1. We're going to change 2 to 4. We're going to change 1 to 2. And I do expect, oh, not 1 to 2. 1, I think we need 3. Button 3, process of elimination. So now we have our punches on the bottom row, 1, 2, and then 5 and 6. Our kicks are on the top row. So I know it's a little tedious. I know there's a lot of mental gymnastics you have to do. But remember, if you like the way you've set it up and you've configured your fighting game, all you have to do is go to Manage Files, and we're going to save the game file. So that way, the next time you load it up, your fighter game is exactly the way you want it. So now we have our punches on the bottom, punches on the top, and we can come back a week later, play this exact fighting game, and it's going to be exactly the same. So I know that was a long tutorial to show you how to rekey a fighting stick. Hopefully that helps. And just remember, step by step, first, configure your controllers. Follow the same pattern that I followed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4 is the bottom row. 5, 6, 7, 8 is the top row from left to right. And then you can go through and configure all of your fighting games exactly as I described here. So if you found this video helpful, let me know by dropping me a comment. Hopefully you made it all the way through. Thank you so much for watching. This is Quick Skills. If you have any other questions about these Emuelec devices, I love just troubleshooting these and figuring them out for myself. I'm not any expert. I just play these devices a lot at home, and I will keep doing it until I figure out a solution. So thank you so much for watching. You have a good day.